Hi everyone, welcome back to the Scratch curriculum. Today we're going to be going over the concepts of variables and lists. So we're going to start out by talking about variables, and before we actually go into using them, we're going to explain kind of what a variable is. So a variable is a storage location that stores and saves data, but it can only store one piece of information at a time. So variables are kind of like storage boxes. Okay, so I have this storage box right over here. But imagine the storage box can only hold one item at a time. So we can put anything we want in this box, but there can only be one thing in it at a time. So imagine we have a box, like this one here. Usually when you have boxes, it's helpful to label them, right? You put a label on the box so you have some sort of idea of what's inside of it. So let's say we label the box toy, right? Okay, so now we know that there's probably going to be some sort of toy in the box, right? So we have the box labeled toy. And then let's say we decide to put a SpongeBob SquarePants action figure inside the toy, alright? So now we have a storage box, and it's labeled toy, and we know we're going to put a SpongeBob SquarePants action figure inside the box. So now we can go ahead and pack the box up. So the box is packed up, and we can't see the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure anymore, but we know it's inside this box. It's labeled toy. So we know we have a box labeled toy, and inside this closed box is a SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. So now we can even go as far as putting the box away. Like, we don't need the box right now. We can go ahead and put it away, right? But say at a later time, you come back and you decide, I want the toy, right? Like, he's asking for the toy. Well, the toy box comes and it opens up, and the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure comes out and goes to him. So this is a very important concept to understand when you're trying to understand variables. You can see that you asked for the label of the box, which was toy. Notice how the cat said, I want the toy. He said, I want the toy, and he got the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. You ask for the label of the box, and you get what's inside of it. So again, he didn't ask for the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. He asked for the toy, but it was known that because he's asking for the toy and the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure is the only thing that's inside of the toy box, he automatically gets the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. So now we understand how boxes work, but what does this have to do with variables, right? Okay, so let's actually go back to this box that we started with here, right? The box that we have here is sort of like, it is a variable. So in this example, this box here is our variable, right? Because variables store information. Well, this box stored an action figure, right? So stores information, stores an action figure. The box is a variable in this example. The label of the box, which we made toy, right? Toy right here. The label of the box is going to be the variable name. So when you make a variable in Scratch or in any other programming language, you're going to name the variable. This is also sometimes called an identifier. The variable name is the same as a box label in this example, okay? So we have a box label here. When we make a variable, we have to name the variable. So it's very similar concepts. And then, finally, we decided to put the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure in here. In variables, you have a value, and a value is what's stored inside the variable. But remember, we can only store one value in a variable at a time. Just like we could only store one thing in this toy box at a time, the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure, we can only store one value in our variable at a time. So the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure is kind of like the value or the item we store in our variable. Another thing to know about variables is that they can be accessed globally or locally. So let's say this toy box, we store it in your bedroom, where only you have access to it, right? Only you can play with it. No one else can open or play with the toy box. That means it's going to be a local variable, okay? Only you have access to it. If we decide to store it in, say, the living room, and you allow your brothers, your sisters, your mom, and your dad, everyone in the house can use and access this toy box, then that means it's a global variable. Everyone has access to it. So in Scratch, when you make a variable, you can make it for this sprite only or for all sprites, okay? For one sprite only is a local variable, and for all sprites is a global variable. Global variables can be accessed by anyone. Local variables can only be accessed by a specific accessor. And then one of the reasons why variables are so useful and used all the time is obviously because we can save information for later use, right? When we packed up the box and put it away, we could come back later and call it a toy, right? So that's one thing. We can also label them as toy. So notice how the cat didn't have to ask for the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure, which is kind of long. you just had to ask for the toy, which was the name of the variable. Another useful thing is that we can change the value of the variable at any time. So at any point in time, I could take the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure out of this box and put, say, a Patrick Star action figure inside the box instead. And then when I ask for the toy box, I won't get the SpongeBob anymore because that's been replaced. I'll get the Patrick Star. Remember, though, you can only store one item in your box or one value in your variable at a time, okay? That's a key thing to remember. So now we're actually going to go ahead and start using variables in Scratch, right? So I'm going to open a new tab here and have a blank program. The little cat is right here. And we're going to actually start making variables, okay? So I'm going to make a variable here. When we go over here, category variables are represented by these dark orange blocks. I'm going to click this button, make a variable right here, right underneath variables. Make a variable, click that. And you can give your variable a name. Remember, this is like the label of the box. Anything you want. I'm going to call it Wordy, and you'll see why in a second. Wordy. And remember, it says for all sprites or for this sprite only. For all sprites means it's a global variable. It can be accessed by all sprites. For this sprite only means it's a local variable. Only can be accessed by one sprite. But we're going to make it global, so we're going to do for all sprites. Again, my name is Wordy. Right, and you can see it pops up over here, Wordy, right? And also pops up at the top over here, Wordy. And you can see right next to it tells you what the value of the variable is, okay? Again, that's the item inside the box per se. So right now it's telling you that the value of the variable Wordy is 0. This is a key thing. Scratch will automatically make the value of a variable 0 by default. But we're going to actually change that because we don't want it to be 0. So to set a variable to something, we're going to go ahead and take the set my variable to block, right? But we have to change my variable by clicking Wordy because we want to change Wordy, not my variable. My variable is a default variable it makes for you, but we're going to use Wordy. We're going to set Wordy to hi, I am a string variable. Okay, and I'll explain what that means in 1 second. Go, you click it, and then up here it has updated. Now Wordy is hi, I am a string variable. And a string is pretty much just any string of text, okay? This is a bunch of words, right? It's a sentence, it's text. In Scratch, you can have 2 different types of variables, okay? The first type is a string variable. And this is this example here where it's a bunch of letters, right? A bunch of letters and text, I guess, okay? So Wordy, hi, I am a string variable, okay? And one way that we can use this variable is we can use a say block. So if I scroll up here and I go to looks, and I take a say block, right now it's set to say hello, right? But we want to actually use our variable, so I go back down to variables. I take my Wordy variable and I put it in the say block. It says say Wordy, right? So you may be thinking, okay, what's the cat going to say? Is he going to say Wordy? Well, let's find out. We click say Wordy, and he says, hi, I am a string variable. Remember back to the box when the cat said, I want the toy, and he didn't actually get the toy box, but rather he got the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure, which was stored inside the box. It's the same concept here. I said say Wordy, but he doesn't actually say Wordy. He's going to say what's stored at Wordy. And hi, I am a string variable is stored at Wordy, so he says, hi, I am a string variable, okay? That's why that's such a key concept. So the cat says, hi, I am a string variable. So that's one way you could use variables. That's great. We're going to go ahead and make another variable. We're going to call this one num, as short for number, and you'll see why in 1 second. Again, you can see the default value for num is 0. So I'm going to go ahead and set variable again. And we're going to do set num, and we're going to make it 5. I'm going to click it. So I already told you guys that the first variable type in Scratch is a string type variable. You can see this has text, right? The second type is a number type variable. So this is a number. So any number we could put in here. This one's a string type. This is a number type, okay? So we made our variable called num, and it's 5. But just like with the string variable, how we were able to put it in a say block, we can do the exact same for our number type variable, right? So I go back up here to looks, get a say block, go back to variables, and take my num variable and put that in here. What do you think the cat's going to say? Is he going to say num, or is he going to say something else? Let's see. Well, if we click this, he says 5, right? Because again, 5 is stored in the num variable. So he's going to say what's stored in the num variable, not num. Because again, num is just the label of the box, but we really want the 5 that's stored inside the box labeled num. Since this is also a number type variable, we can use it in different ways than just the say block. So I'm actually going to go, last week you guys learned about different operators, so I'm going to take this operator here, the plus operator, and we're going to take my num variable, so you can just keep dragging them from here, num plus num. And then we're going to take another say block, and I'm going to put this whole operator in the say block. Okay, so it says say num plus num. Okay, again, do you think the cat is literally going to say num plus num? Well, let's find out. If we click the say block here, the cat says 10. We put num plus num in a say block. 5 plus 5 is 10. So now the cat is going to say 10. So you can kind of do addition, multiplication, subtraction, division, anything like that using the operator blocks and putting variables inside those blocks. And then we can even put that inside a say block. But if I were to take this out and just click it, it says 10 right there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. Another thing that we can do is we can change the value of the variable. And remember how we talked about that before? We talked about how I could take the SpongeBob action figure out and put a Patrick Star action figure in. That's one way we could do it. We could at any point say, take a set variable, say set num, and then we can change this to, let's say 7, right? Boom, and then num just changes 7. We didn't have to make a whole new variable. All we had to do was reset it to something else. So that's one way we can change the variables. Scratch also has something else called change variable by that we can use. So we're going to take this change my variable by block. We're going to change it to num. And we want to increment the value by 1. An increment means increase. Okay, so right now it's 7. We want to increment the value of num by 1. Okay, that's why it says change num by 1. So if we click that, note how right now it's 7. If I click this though, see how it changes to 8. Okay, if I click it again, see how it changes to 9. Okay, every time I click this, the value goes up by 1. If I said change by 2, note how right now it's 9, but I click it and now it goes up to 11. We can also decrement the values of a variable by making this a negative number right here, okay? So let's say -3, okay? I put -3 in here. Note how right now it's 11. Change by -3, and now it's 8. I click it again, and now we're back to 5, right where we started. So the change by block will let you increase or decrease your variables that you have. Also, this is a number type variable, right? This is 5. Let's see what happens if we change wordy. Remember, wordy is hi, I am a string variable, right? So if I change wordy by 1, what do you think is going to happen? Is it going to say hi, I am a string variable 1? That doesn't really make that much sense, right, for it to do that. Well, to understand this, you have to understand the fact that in Scratch, string variables are automatically assigned a numeric value of 0 by default. So it's kind of similar to the fact that when we make a new variable, every single time, it's equal to 0 by default, right? Every single time we made a variable, my variable is 0, right? A random variable, Scratch automatically makes the value 0. With string type variables, Scratch automatically gives these variables a number value of 0 in case you try to do math or operations with them, right? Because you can't really do math with hi, I am a string variable. So they have to give it the number 0 so that you can do that if you try to use it for math or operations, okay? So if I say change wordy by 1, what's actually going to happen is it's going to change to 1. Because remember, the number that wordy is, even though it's a string type variable, the number that wordy was 0. So when we say change by 1, it's going to increase by 1. And since it's 0, 0 increased by 1 is now 1. But let's say if I go change by -1, is it going to go back to hi, I am a string variable? No, it goes back to 0. Once you change it to a number by using the change by block, it's going to stay a number unless you set it back. So here I'm going to go set wordy to hi, I am a string variable. I'm going to change wordy to hi, I am a string variable by clicking this again. And now it's back to being a string variable, okay? But if I click change wordy by -1 again, now it's a -1. Because remember, the number that's assigned to string variables is 0 until you change it, okay? And we can still change it like normal and it goes down to -2. right? Okay, so but I'm going to go ahead and change that back. And then these show variable blocks can just very quickly, you click it, now my variable shows up on the screen. You change that to wordy, right? It's like show wordy. It's already on the screen actually, so let me uncheck that. Show variable, it pops up at the top, right? That's all that does. Hide variable is the same idea. Hide variable, now my variable goes away. Wordy's on the screen, so if I change this to wordy, hide variable, now wordy goes away. Okay, so that's all that does. Now those usually aren't that important unless you do or do not want users to see that in your project. You can also just click these checks over here to hide them. So the next thing we're going to talk about are lists. Okay, see this make a list button right here? So that's what we're going to be going into next. But before we go into that, I'm going to actually explain what lists are. I'm going to go back to this first tab here. So we have a bedroom here. And let's say we want to make a list of different items that you have in your room. So I'm going to actually go here. All right. And I have a list called room, and I have different items in my room labeled. Okay. So the first thing I put on my list is bed, right? And you can see right here, obviously I have a bed in my room, right? That makes sense. Then I put number 2, a lamp. Okay, that makes sense. I also have a lamp right here in my room, so that makes sense. Number 3, I put calendar. Again, there's a calendar right here. Number 4, I put clock. Perfect, there's a clock right here. And then number 5, I put SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. Well, if you look in the room, I don't see a SpongeBob SquarePants action figure anywhere in the room. Why would I put SpongeBob SquarePants action figure on the list? Well, if you recall, we put the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure in the toy box. And I'm pretty sure we can all see this toy box right here, right? So even though I can't actually see the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure, I know it's being stored in the toy box. So I can see the toy box in my room and add the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure to the list of items in my room, even though it's being stored in a box right now. This goes to show that when you make a list is kind of like a variable. But the difference between a list and a variable is that a variable can only store one item or value at a time. A list can store multiple items and multiple values at once, okay? So this is an example of a list right here called room. It's going to say the name of the list at the top. And it's going to say all the items that are in the list, and they're going to be numbered. So we said bed, lamp, calendar, clock, right? And SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. Well, when you're making a list, you can either add items directly to the list, like how we added bed, lamp, calendar, clock, right? Calendar, clock. Well, we can also add variables to our list, okay? Which you don't have to. You can add variables to your list. You can add that value directly to your list, like how we just added bed. But in this example, we kind of added the toy box to the list, right? Even though it says SpongeBob SquarePants action figure here, we don't actually see the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure anywhere. So we can add the variable toy to our list, and it will automatically add the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure for us, because I know the item we're really talking about is what's inside the box, not the actual box itself. So you can add items in boxes or items that aren't in boxes, right? You can add a variable or you can add a value directly to the list. And when the list is done, it's going to have all the room items that are in boxes, variables, or that are not in boxes, just straight values, right? So another thing about lists is that you can access certain items in the list by referencing their number, okay? So if I say, give me the third item in my room, well, if we look at the list room, right, the third item, 1, 2, 3, is calendar. So if I say, give me the third item in my room, I will get this calendar here, right? If I say, give me the fourth item in my room, it'll give me a clock, right? This clock right here. Or I can actually go backwards and say, what number is my bed? And it will tell me 1 because bed is at 1, right? So now that we kind of understand the concept of list, we're going to go ahead and use list, right? I'm going to go here. Okay. So I've cleared this up and we're going to go ahead and make a list. So let's make a list. And we're going to just call this my list, okay? So I have a list called my list. And you can see it pop up here, but right now it's empty. And that's another thing. Variables in Scratch, it automatically assigns a value 0 for them, right? With lists, they're just automatically empty by default, okay? So we're going to add a value by scrolling down here. You can see when you make a list, you kind of unlock some more different blocks, right? So there are a lot of list blocks here that weren't there before. So we're going to use this add to my list block right here. And it lets us add something. So we can go in here and put a number, right? Put 27. Okay, we can click that, boom. And now if we look at my list, we have 27 in the list. Now in this example, we just typed the number directly in the add to block, right? We just directly typed 27 in here. So this would be an example of adding, say, the lamp to the list, right? So if we go back here, the lamp isn't in a box, right? It's just itself. When we add the lamp to the list, we're just adding that value. Same here, we just typed in 27, we're adding that. But let's say we take another one here, and then we scroll back up to the variables we made earlier. So let's take num, and we put num in my list. Now, is it going to add the word num to the list? Well, let's find out. We click this, and it adds 7. Because remember, the value of num is 7. So add 7 to the list. Now, this is like how we added the SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. We can't actually see the action figure. We can just see toy right here. But it doesn't add toy to the list. It adds what's inside of toy to the list, which is a SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. So hopefully that makes a little more sense now. Right? So we add num to my list, but it really adds 7, which is what's being stored inside of num. Now some more cool blocks in Scratch. We have the delete one, right? So let's say I don't want a 7 to be in my list anymore. Right? So what I can do is in Scratch, I can either click this X right here and just click that and boom, now it's not in my list. But if we actually want to program it, I'm going to add that back, right? So I just added that back right there. If we actually want to program this says delete blank of my list. So you might think, okay, well, do I want to delete 7, right? Because 7 is in the list. Do I want to get rid of that? So let's try that. I type 7 in there and nothing happens. It doesn't delete it. It's still there. So that's not what we want to do. What this block actually does is you type in the position of the item that you want to delete. So the position of item 7 is 2. Right here, it has a 2 right here. We want to delete the item of my list that's at position 2. Okay, so that's what that means. We click this, and now 7 is no more. Now, a list can contain both string types and number type values and variables. So right now we only have added numbers to this, but we're going to go ahead and add a string type value to this list. I'm just going to type in hello. We click this, and now hello showed up in the list. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this list up. We're just going to add 3 different items to it. So we're going to add 64. And instead of having to drag a whole new add block, we can just go ahead and change this in here. We can just say cat, right? Add cat to my list. Okay, perfect. And then notice every time I add an item to the list, it automatically puts it at the end, right? But sometimes it's helpful to be able to add items to a specific location, right? You can go ahead and insert things at specific locations or at specific positions in your list. So we're going to go ahead and use the insert thing at of my list, right? So I take this block from here. Okay. We're going to add green. In what position? Well, if I type in 3 right here, the word green should be added to the spot right here, right? Because it should be put at position 3. Okay, but how's that going to change everything else we already have? Well, let's click and find out. So as you can see, green is now at 3, right? Just as we wanted. 64 was the old value of 3, but it got pushed down. And everything else beneath it got pushed down too. Okay, so when we insert something, it takes that position and it pushes the one that was there before down, and it pushes everything underneath it down. So Scratch used to be at position 5, but we inserted green at position 3, and now it's at position 6. But 27 and hello 1 and 2 stayed the same because they haven't been affected by that. Alright, so now we have, let's say I decided that I don't actually want green in my list anymore. So I can go ahead and take this delete button here, or delete block, sorry, and I can put in 3, right? Because we put the position in the delete block, right? The position of the item we want to delete. So I put in 3. Boom, now green is gone and everything goes back to normal, okay? Go ahead and delete those blocks. Let's say we want to completely replace 64, right? Let's say we want to replace 64 with 54, okay? Let's say we wanted that to be 54. Well, on Scratch, we can either go in right here and type that, 54, boom, now it's changed. Or, if I change this back to 64, we can do it a different way. We can delete position 3, okay? And then insert 54 at 3, right? So delete item 3. Boom, now these move up. Cat is now number 3 and Scratch is now number 4. And then we can insert 54 at 3. Boom, now 54 is at 3, Cat is back to 4, and Scratch is at 5. Okay, so that's one way you can replace an item, but that's kind of long, right? You have to use 2 whole blocks to do that. Luckily, Scratch has a replace item block. So I can replace item by putting in the position. So I can replace item 3 of my list with, and I can just go ahead and put 64 back in there if I want to change it back to that. Boom, and now it automatically does those 2 blocks in one step, right? It automatically replaces this item with 64. Another block that is given to us by Scratch is the delete all block. Okay, so if I can go ahead and click this, and it will delete all the items from my list. It'll just make it empty. Okay, we're not going to actually do that right now, but that's an option if you want to clear the contents of your list quickly. Okay, so we're going to move on. Now we kind of know how to make a list, and we know how to add and delete items from the list. Well, how do we get and use items and item numbers in the length of a list? Okay, those are what we're going to be talking about next. So let me go ahead and get rid of this. This is the list we have right now that we're going to work with. The first thing I'm going to introduce is the item of MyList block, right? So I can use this block right here to find out what item is at any given position. I can type in number 4 here, item 4 of my list, click it, and it tells me cat, right? And if we look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, cat right here. Well, how do we use this block? We can do the same thing we've been doing and put it in a say block, right? Like this. And then click it, and now the cat says cat. Okay, cool. Or notice how nowhere in this block does it say cat, but it says say item 4 of my list. And we look here, and item 4 of my list is cat. So the cat is going to say cat. Another thing that we can do we can put in this item 4 in the length of block, and it'll give me 3, right? Nowhere does it say cat right here, but we know that item 4 of my list is cat, and then it counts 1, 2, 3, and returns 3. Another thing we can do is we can find the position of any item on the list. Well, we can go here, and we can take the item number of block, right? And we can type in hello. And when we click this, it'll tell you what position in the list hello is. We know hello is number 2 because we can look at it here. But if we didn't know that, if we had this list hidden or something, hide that, we have no idea, right? We click it and it tells us 2. Now what happens if we type in something that's not in the list? If I type in dog and click that, it tells you the position is 0, which as you can tell, there is no position 0. That's just Scratch's way of telling you it's not in the list. One thing to know about it is it's not case sensitive. So if I type in cat in all caps and click it, it'll still tell us the position 4. But if I type in cat with a space after, not found, right? It has to be the exact, but it's just not case sensitive. Now remember, because this returns a number, right? Hello returns 2. We can use this just like we would use a number type variable. So if I go to operators here and take the plus block, I can put this in both fields. Here, I type in hello here, and it gives us 4 because the item number of hello is 2, right? So really this is just 2 plus 2, and it gives us 4. So that's a way you can use that. Another cool thing that we can do If you remember the replace item block, right? One thing that makes it maybe not as useful is that we have to know the position of the item we want to replace. Let's say we don't know the numbers of all the items in our list, but we know what's in it, right? So I know I have 27, hello, 64, cat, and scratch. I just don't know what order they're in, right? But I also know that I want to replace cat with dog. Normally, I would be able to just type in 4 here and then type in dog here, click it, and it would replace dog, right? But again, let's say I don't know what number cat is at. I just know that I want to replace it with dog. Well, I can take the item number block and I can type in cat. Okay? Now what this is going to do is it's going to find what number cat is at for you, right? See how it says 4? But let's say we didn't know that. We put this block in the replace item block, right? So now it says replace item number of cat in my list with dog. So we put the item number of cat in my list. This finds what position cat is at. Now we know what position cat is at, and we can put that position in the replace item. Remember, because you put replace item and then the position, the item number. So we put the item number of cat in here, we replace it with dog. We click this block, boom, and now it replaces cat with dog, even though we never had to type in 4. So that's kind of cool. You can replace an item without knowing its position. Now, another cool thing that we can do is we can find the length of a list. Now, Scratch, of course, tells you the length of the list at the bottom right here, 5. But again, let's say we couldn't see that. Take the length of my list, click it, and it'll tell you 5 right here. A cool use of this is we could take the delete of block, right? We put this in here, delete length of, right? Well, note how this list looks now. I click this and boom, it just took away scratch, right? Why did it do that? Well, the length of my list was 5 before I did that, right? The length of the list was 5. So I really put 5 in here and it deleted item 5 from my list. Now, if we do it again, what's going to happen? Look at the list, how it looks now. We click this and boom, now dog is gone. Well, why did that happen? The length of the list was 4, right? So we deleted item 4 from the list. Every time we do this, we delete the length of the list. Again, it's going to delete the last item from the list because the number of the last item is the same as the length of the list. Because in Scratch, you start counting with 1, 2, 3, so on, right? So the last item 2 in this case, is going to be equal to the length. So when you delete the length of the list, it will remove the last item. Another thing that you can do in the last feature, besides the show list and hide list, which do the same thing as they do in variable, but the last block in list is the MyList Contains thing ? And if you remember back, we talked about sensing a while ago, and we had some sensors here, right? And remember the key, and we also have some operators that are that same hexagon shape. And one of those uses that we put them in if blocks, right? If then, or if then else, or wait until, or repeat until, right? This is no different. The MyList Contains, what that's going to do is it's going to tell you true or false if something is in your list. So right now it says MyList Contains thing, right? If we click this, it says false because nowhere in the list do I have anything called thing. If I type in 27 and click it, it says true because it has 27 in the list, right? If I type in cat and I click it, it says false because cat isn't in the list right now. Even though it was in the list at one point, it's not in there anymore. So it returns false. So what would we use this for? Again, that's going to be the if then or if then else primarily. Of course, you could use it with other things too, but primarily that. So I'm going to take the if then else block and I'm going to put this in here. If my list contains cat, then. And then we're going to go up here to the say blocks. And if it does contain cat, we're going to say yes. If it does not contain cat, we're going to say no. So if I click this, and he says no, well, why? If my list contains cat, say yes. Well, does it contain cat? No. So else, it says no, which is why it says no, right? If I say, if my list contains hello, then say yes, I'll say no. I click this, and now the cat says yes, because hello is in the list. So that's pretty much your brief introduction to variables and lists. Remember, variables can store only one item at a time. Lists are like variables, but they can store multiple items at a time. The good thing about variables and lists is that we can change the value that's being stored in them.